into my virtual living room, which is PyCharm, and I'm not being paid to say that. So, yeah. Shall we get started then right away with
jump right into it?
Okay. The reason, so what I'm trying to do to start with, I'm on a computer that I never use, that I just installed freshly. I'm usually using Linux, and I'm on a Mac, as you might see. And what I'm trying to do is to start really from scratch. I prepared a little bit to get some kind of development environment set up for me that I can work with, so that I can have then start a new project and have set it up with virtual environments.
Is this presentation automation?
Yeah, I'm automating the presentation, that's right. So, and I'm too lazy to prepare it before, so I'll do it right now. Now, the thing is really why I thought I'd do this is because I started giving more courses, and the first hour of that course, or sometimes even longer, is the most painful bit, where you try to help everybody get started to get their setup going so that they can develop in Python and run their tests and everything. And I came up with some kind of with the most portable way of doing this, of starting from scratch. So this might seem very basic. So if you are into build and test automation already, and you're working with tox already in pytest, most of these things will be seeming very trivial to you. And you might ask yourself why I'm doing that, but this is supposed to be an introductory webinar. So, and what I want to help with is to remove some kind of magical thinking about how things work. So this is why I do this from scratch approach. And if you see me fumbling and closing the window when I want to type something, that's because I have keyboard shortcuts that are completely different from what I know. But yeah, so the first thing what I do if I want to start developing something, as I'm working with tox for a long time, and that is basically what I use to automate all my development and testing activities, the first thing I actually do is create a tox environment. And to be able to do that on a new computer, I need to install something. But before I go into the details of that, let's quickly see if I said already what I wanted to say. I want to create a complete develop, build, test, deploy workflow based on tox, starting from a pretty much freshly installed system in about 45 minutes. And the idea is really to create a complete vertical slice through the whole process in one go, leaving out many important details, but giving a bird's eye perspective on how things work and how they play together. And yes, I can read English. And some things I wanted to say before, there are promising new developments in building and packaging. We talked about that just now, PEP 517, 518, Py project TOML. Basically, you can start having projects that don't need setup Py anymore and setup tools and all this. And those are all really interesting things, but I'm not going to go into them. All I can say now is tox is basically supporting these workflows already. So if you want to try testing something with Flit, just try it. And if it doesn't work, then hit our issue tracker. So we'll concentrate on setup Py and setup tools workflow, because this is just the thing that works and will work for many years to come. And we'll always use the simplest possible approach for every tool. I'm going to show a lot of tools, and I will just use the simplest use case for it, basically, so that you see, okay, I can use this, and somehow it's for that, and this is basically how it works. As life is messy and there are many corner cases, there might be questions. There are going to be many questions I can answer, I'm sure, but maybe I can hint then or know where I look. I will be explicitly mentioning a lot of things that are painfully obvious for people who are experienced in Python, but which are often not obvious for newcomers in packaging and automation. So this is what the whole thing is about. I will be leaving out a lot of things already mentioned in passing. And yeah, live coding on a system, I don't know. Let's see how that goes. I like making a fool of myself. So I do it on macOS, but I tried it to be as portable as possible with two caveats. One is on Windows, symlinking works a bit differently. And you might have to actually create a little batch file that is called then Python 2.7 and Python 3.6, two of them that are in your path so that tox can cope with it. But those are all corner cases. They are handled in the developer FAQ of tox, for example. And so there are documentations about these corner cases. And if you work on a file system that doesn't support symlinking, you need to do some extra work, and I can't help you with that, I'm afraid, because I don't use these. Yeah, so everything else, they really exceed the scope of what I'm trying to do. So now we can get started. Yeah, so and let's start from the documentation. What is tox? How does it describe itself? It's a generic virtual env management and test command line tool you can use for checking your package installs, running your tests, acting as a front end to continuous integration. So that's basically the idea that people have about it nowadays, and that is how it's used mostly. But what what I use it for and what I want to show it as, it's basically a completely generic Python-based automation tool. So it does all that, it comes from that, but it can do much more. And for me, it's basically the single entry point into the developer activities. So this is why I start actually from a tox.ini, if I start a project. So what did I did before is, it was a fresh Mac, freshly installed, and this is supposed to be a developer box. This is not necessary on good CI systems. They don't need no manual preparation whatsoever. Usually you have some kind of thing where you say pip install tox and you're done. On a normal system, let's say it's a bit harder. So I went to python.org, downloaded 3.6. I ran the installer, went through the menu, chose all the defaults and made sure that Python is added on my path. Then I opened my terminal and typed in Python 3 and woohoo, it worked. So then the next step would be that I want my tox somewhere. And that's the first thing I want to clear out of the way right away. Python virtual envs, there's nothing virtual about it. They are not scary magic. They are basically just a copy of a Python interpreter, complete Python interpreter, that you can then install your stuff in. And the extra magic that Python virtual envs have for you is that you have pip setup tools and wheel installed in there, which means that if you have a virtual environment, then you can say pip install and get whatever you need. And you shouldn't need pip on your, let's say, mother interpreter that you downloaded. That doesn't have pip installed, and it doesn't need it, because the normal workflow is really you create a virtual environment and you install stuff in it and you use it.
In fact, one could say that you don't want it because you might mistakenly install software into kind of your mother Python.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way how to create dependency hell for yourself, if you install everything in the main interpreter. Yeah, and the other thing that's really important to point out is that you don't need to activate it even. So what I did, this is the commands I typed in. I typed cd to go into my home directory. I typed python 3 -m venv, because venv comes packaged with Python. If you're not on Ubuntu, there you have to install an extra package, but that's also there then. So you type python 3 -m venv, and this is then a relative path to the virtual environment I want to create. I call this tox space because this will be simply there to provide tox as a command line tool, nothing else. So I create this in the home of my user directory, and then if I type those commands, .tox space bin pip list, then it lists, I think, setup tools, wheel, and pip, and that's it, because pip I use already. So, and those are the command lines tools. I can access them like that. I can access them through their absolute path and use them. So if I install tox with pip install tox and ask for its version, it works. And this is all I need there. I need some kind of ways to have tox as a command line tool, and then I can get started doing what I actually want to do. And it's just a few lines of commands. And then I create a binary, a bin file for myself. It's actually wrong here. It doesn't have to be a .bin, it can be a normal bin. And there I symlink then my tox into it so that I don't have to type the whole path. And that's the whole thing I have to do to get started, basically, to have tox. Yeah.
We have one question already that is meant for you, not us.
Okay.
Is tox included in Anaconda? Well, you just discussed kind of a python.org pip.
Yeah, I'd like to really leave that out because Anaconda is a whole different beast.
Got it.
And tox does not work together with Anaconda yet.
Got it.
So that's a
it's got its own concept of isolation, right?
Let's get into that maybe. I'm sure we're going to have time afterwards, and then I'm going into the details of that. For now, completely Anaconda-free workflow.
Got it.
If you're on Windows, I know the pain that it solves. It's a really good package system, so, but for now, let's leave that out. Yeah, so I have it linked, and I linked my tox binary then into my bin directory. So absolute path to my tox bin, into my bin, and then I can say which tox, and then it's users or Bestwalter .tox base bin tox. And now I have a generic command line tool that happens to be installed in a virtual env, but it doesn't matter. I don't need to activate it. All I need is a path, and that's what I have now. So I have a tox now. And if you ask for the version, you always get the absolute path also. And that looks not very nice, but it's really handy for debugging. You can always be sure what you actually be using. So now we can start. So I go into projects and I create like a JBW, a JetBrains webinar, right. And I touch the tox.ini and run tox and see what happens. So error, no setup file found. The expected location is blah, 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 which is my folder, and with some help. So, and that help was created not by me, it grew there recently, which is really nice because that was the main thing that people asked for the first thing. What's this? Well, why do I need a setup py? I just want to need tox, use tox for testing, and you don't need it. And that's the second link. So
is this something Benoit did?
Sorry?
Is this something Benoit added, or?
Sorry, I didn't understand.
Benoit, is this something that your other?
Bernard Gabo, yeah, I'm pretty sure he did that, yeah, okay. Because it wasn't me, and yeah, so he's doing a lot of work at the moment, improving tox as such. So
it's nice to have a project that has a lot of vitality and people in it.
Oh yes, yeah, I'm really grateful he's there, and he's really moving the project forward so that I can sit here and talk about how great it is without actually being involved in development at the moment, feeling guilty about it in the back of my head, but I can cope still now. Yeah, so the second link here is the main thing, avoiding expensive pytest, it's called, which basically explains that you can switch off this. So you can start testing, you don't need anything yet. You just switch that switch on, which is called skip sdist, short for skip source distribution. And if you put that on, then it doesn't try to build a package, because that's what's happening there. It tries to find setup py to be able to build a package from your project, but we don't have anything yet. So it actually makes sense that this error comes. So skip sdist equals true. The motivation was because it's expensive, but nowadays it's just happy. So it's a good coincidence, because I can just then and let me open the project folder here in my PyCharm first. So it's in my home folder, projects. Is it not in projects? Oh no, I'm in home, that's right. So it should be here. And here we are. I'm on a system I don't know my way around. Where am I? Ah, Dropbox. Okay, doesn't really matter. At least it's synced then. So I want to open this project now to attach it. So it turns up here. So here's my tox.ini, and something happened there already, but there's nothing in there yet. So tox tried to do something, but gave up and left everything untouched. So now we create a global section where we want to have our skip sdist. So, and if I try this again now, then it does something. Python creates. So if I don't say anything, it creates an environment called Python. That's the standard environment using the interpreter that it's run with. So it should be created from the virtual environment tox runs in, and created a new virtual environment in my .tox, which is called Python. And that's also something I wanted to mention. It's perfectly all right to create a virtual environment from an interpreter that happens to be a virtual environment, because there's nothing virtual about it. So you can do that. And now I have a Python environment here, and if I wanted to use that as my project environment, the fact that this logo is there is that's not by nature. It's due to a plugin called pypi and manage. that is not in the normal installed. Yeah, that's not in. Yeah, so this one, pyvi manage, that adds like a little context menu. What's it called? Context menu entry, so that I can set this as my project venv. And let's see if that works now, because this has still a bug that it doesn't work if you have several projects. And a little display bug. So it is still in heavy development, but I'm still using it in my daily life because if you get it to work correctly, then it's really making your life much easier. Yeah, so now it has this JWB tox Python environment set as my interpreter.
This plugin is from Nokia, and it's for people who want to juggle between environments in one project, right?
Yeah, because I mean, the idea is I have this tox, and we are now in the middle of everybody is trying to move from Python 2 to Python 3.
Yeah. Right.
And how do you do that? You have to have at least two virtual environments, one Python 2, one Python 3, and then you're writing your code and you're testing. Then you want to test it with 2 or 3, right. And then you can switch forth and back. And this is what we're going to do next, if I'm not mistaken. So let's say we did this and we got somewhere. I also wanted to remove the tox.ini again and use tox quick start, but I'm already waffling on for quite a while, so let's skip that. But you can use tox quick start to have a tox.ini generated for you. And if I want now, let's say I want to create a project already, I know it needs to support Python 2 and 3, and I want to have a tox file that supports this. I prepared this little thing here. And if I can manage to copy the text, I can actually copy it over. Yeah. So this is now the next step. Now I want actually to have two environments. I want to have one Python 3 based and one Python 2 based. Python 2 is already installed on Mac, so it's going to be using this Apple provided Python 2.7 and the Python 3 I installed. And how I can do that explicitly, there are other ways to configure this, and I won't get into the details of this because I want to keep this simple. I can just say I want a test env, and normally the Python I use is Python 3. And if I then create test env, so this is the section that creates new environments. It's called test env, and that is a fixed name. I better mention that also, what is fixed and what is not fixed. That is fixed by the program, and that is your decision how you call this. So this is the environment you give it. So that's dev3, I call this, for develop environment Python 3. And I can give a description, which is just the Python that it used. This is one special thing about tox, that you can have substitutions, these curly braces. There is an amount of things that you can stick in there, and one of them is env Python. That will be replaced then with the Python that's running in this environment. So if I set this description and set these commands, let's see first what happens if I just ask tox what this is about. So tox -av gives me now default environments, dev3, dev2, and it tells me users Oliver Bestwalter, blah, 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 dev3, dev2, which will both be Pythons. And if I run tox again now, yeah, let's just run it again now. I can also show that it's not going to delete this other one now. So it's going to create two new ones, and this old one is still there, although it's basically obsolete.
It's unwired now, it's not discoverable.
But it's still there. And I mean, the thing how you can see this .tox is really, this is something you can throw away any minute. There is nothing in there that has any value whatsoever, other than it's being created for you automatically. And that's the whole point of it, that you don't have to do that by hand.
If you do something by hand in there, you're doing it wrong.
Yes. So you can remove that whenever you want. And the first approach always, if something's not working right, you just say tox -- recreate, or short tox -r, and that means throw everything away and build everything new, because that's exactly what it's for. Because tox is definitely not perfect, and it is living in a world that is not perfect. And there are bugs in virtual env, for example, and in pip. Well, you couldn't even call it bugs. It's like shortcomings, because they are hard problems. And dependency management is a hard problem in every programming language. So if you change some dependencies, if you change something in your requirements or in your setup py, and sometimes it doesn't get picked up, then just recreate all the environments and see if everything works again then. And then if that doesn't help, then there are other debugging possibilities that I'm going to get to in a minute. But now we have these two, dev 2 and 3, and I can switch back and forth between them. So I can, if I want then to test my code in 2, I can choose this, otherwise I choose the other one. So
can I get a couple questions then while you're just doing the transition?
Okay. I know yet already that we're going to run long, if that's okay, but because
these are two words.
Yeah, okay.
Is this tox link, symlink easily updatable?
Why does that need? Oh, if the
this was from like 10 minutes
package is updated.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Yes, because it's a virtual environment. So if I want to update it, I can say tox-base. Let's move in my So
you don't have to recreate it.
Yeah, I mean, I can just say tox-base bin pip -u. Tox, and then tox gets updated. It's a virtual env. I can do exactly the same things like in every other virtual env.
It's good for you to keep saying that.
So I can update my packages just like in every other thing. So the symlink is just making sure that I have that command on my path,
right?
So that I can just type tox because I'm lazy. I don't want to type
the full path,
tox, but I can do that. So I don't even need that symlink. There's nothing special about that symlink. It's just making it more convenient.
Second question, odd one.
Okay.
Regarding requirements, does it also work with pipenv?
Also exceeding the scope of this webinar by 10,000%.
Okay, continue.
Yeah, maybe afterwards. I would have to say a lot about pipenv also, but it just doesn't fit in here.
I'll tell this person to contact you directly.
Yeah, or Kenneth Wrights maybe better. So these are the most important things for me. I really want to get them out of the way because I don't care about rocket science applications of this. I want to put you that is listening still and didn't switch their browser off yet to be in the place that you're able to debug the problems and that you're able to start from scratch. And the other next thing is really important to find out what's going on is tox -- show config, which shows me in a not very nice way yet. That's also something that I really would like to improve. But actually, it's quite a good visualization because it really shows basically the objects that are in the configuration. So this is a set containing the environment that would be passed. So here you can actually see this is all the configuration. This is everything that's there, and this is everything you can manipulate also through the configuration. And a lot of things are somehow even self-explanatory if you look at it. Change here, you can say change into another directory before you do anything. That's a bit of a more not so clear one. I won't mention that clearly. But ignore errors means exactly that. Use at your own discretion. And recreate, you can even force recreate an environment. You can set recreate to true for an environment. It gets always recreated. That could be handy in the CI environment, for example. But in the CI, usually you have a completely new virtual machine for a test or something like that. And parsenv is really something important in the context of that we do in isolation of environment variables. We don't pass every environment variable through to the test run. So you can actually see here what is being passed through by default because they are actually needed by the underlying system. And they are different also ones for Windows and Mac and Linux. And then if you want to pass additional environment variables, for example, because you need them from your CI system, then you actually have to ask for that by setting parsenv and with a wildcard. For example, parsenv Travis _star, and then it passes everything through from Travis so that you can use it. Yeah, so here that's really handy then to see how is it configured, what can I configure, and it's all documented not too badly nowadays in the documentation. So this tox -- show config, and if something is really weird, and this is not a joke, so this is really the maximum verbosity. And this is because the first 3 V's are actually for tox, and the last 3 V's are for pip. So they're passed through to pip. So I run tox with triple verbosity and pip with triple verbosity, because what tox does under the hood, I haven't explained that yet explicitly, but tox doesn't do really very magical things. What it does is it creates virtual environments with standard virtual env, so that tool, that third-party tool, or if you install a plugin for tox, if you say pip install tox minus venv, then it uses the inbuilt venv if you have a Python tree. And it creates that virtual environment for you exactly like you would do it, and exactly like I just showed you with the tox base. There's no difference to that. So tox creates this, and if you run it like this, then it shows you exactly what it does, and it shows you the settings, the steps, and what pip does if it has more to say, if things go wrong. So you can see really tox as a stupid wrapper about around virtual environments, and then run some code in them. So create a virtual environment, install some things, for example, the project, or as you see now, or even nothing, just create virtual environments and run some commands, because if you looked at the tox.ini that I copied in there, here I say run some commands, and the first command is python ---- version. And the second one is running a Python command import sys print sys executable. If I look at the output, this is what's being output then. So this is here the Python that's being output. So you can run any arbitrary command in there, but it's not a shell replacement. There's no wildcarding in there or anything. Those are questions come up. Why can't I use this star.py and do something there? We don't try to build a shell in there, and that would be making the code much more complicated. So if you want to have any kind of intelligence like that, then you could have a little script that does that for you and run that little script there that does wildcarding.
One thing that's interesting is it's fast. It doesn't feel, that you think that, oh, it's doing all this work to make an environment on every run and all this other stuff, but it doesn't feel that much different than just running the Python interpreter with the -c to run something.
And I mean, and this is all mainly thanks to caching on different levels, which is good. But then, you know, there's the downside of it.
You got to know about the magic.
You have to know how to delete the caches if things don't work. And -r is deleting the cache for tox, basically. So, and this, if you understood this, then you understand what tox does now, and there's not really much more. Everything else is basically details. It creates a virtual environment for you. It installs the project if you have one. It installs dependencies that you can configure. That will be the next step now, and it runs some commands. And it does that for every environment that you either explicitly ask for, or if you don't ask for anything explicitly, then it runs all of them that are the default environments. And if you don't set an env list here, which you could, like env list like this, then all environments that you defined are ran. If I would put env list here dev3, then it would run only this one. And there's a lot of magic there going on, and generative and all that, and I won't go into that because I'm talking for half an hour now already, while trying to keep things simply.
One point that I'm sure you emphasize with your students, can you go back to that?
Code?
It's a configuration file that's a plain text file. It's not a Python file, and it's checked into version control. So everyone in the project is going to get the same environments when they run their tests and things.
And that's the thing. I mean, that's the main motivation. Because I mean, in my company, I mean, I'm using that in my work to make life easier for myself and to make life easier for my colleagues. Because if I set up the project properly, all I have to say to my colleague is, here, check that out and run tox -e dev, and then you have a development environment and you can get started right away.
And when I was talking with you about coming on the webinar and who our webinar attendees are and who our customers are, a lot of them are at big companies. And you see a lot of these big companies where the README is install this, install that, etc. And you can never predict what is actually happening on your colleague's machine. So if you have a README that tells people, here's the laundry list of stuff to install, you're a good candidate for tox.
And I mean, that's why I like Tox. I'm really bad at these things. I'm really bad at following manual steps. I'm better at programming something that relieves me of doing those manual steps. So this is why I really love Tox. Yeah. Okay, so that would show config we had. We had the VVV option, and this is like the two first steps if you want to figure out what's going wrong. Get all the information you can have. And if that doesn't even cut it yet, then you can add some extra debugging commands, obviously. So I could run anything in here that gives me more information about what might go wrong. I mean, that would be the next obvious thing to do, because you can stick everything in here that you need to get more information. And then if that even goes wrong, and this is already advanced, I just mention it so to have the whole process, you can also run Tox programmatically and attach a debugger to the process. So you can say import Tox command line, and then you run the command line, and you pass in exactly the arguments that you would pass on the command line. And then you have, for example, in PyCharm, you can run this there as a PyCharm process. And then I think the automatic attachment doesn't work, but we have this. This is why I put this link in here for the developer facts. Unable to find application named Firefox. Okay, this is my, this seems to be my import. I imported some of my settings. Yeah. What happens if I say fix? I say fix Safari. Okay, yeah. That should work now, shouldn't it?
I think it's at first list.
I wanted to use Safari.
Instead of first list.
So if I okay, so custom path.
Switch to system default, yeah.
System default. Yeah, okay, so that should work.
Forget.
Okay, I have a new bug for the PyCharm developer. Okay, so I think I have them though here. Yeah, I'm always prepared for things going wrong. So there's the developers. I always say fuck, I'm sorry, it's the FAQ actually. I'm German. It's actually the way I say it in German. I don't mean to be rude. So here's actually some help, with the multiple Python versions on Windows, so that you know where it is.
Yeah.
And here is the thing with the pytest to attach to a debugger, attach to sub-process automatically while debugging. So this you can do, that works, but this is already, hitting the advanced area. But this is there, and I think I'll just put this thing online afterwards, and we can provide a link or something. Okay, and now we're not even there yet. We didn't even write one line of code, and we're already half an hour in or so. It's unbelievable. So now I write a simple script. Yay, Python code. So what shall we do? Shall we write a little calculator? Sure. Write some production code that is really very advanced. So def calc A, B, and let's multiply that and return the result. And as we want to have a proper tool, it should run on the command line. So we need a def, and this def will print out its results then. And I mean, nobody will do anything else than multiplying 3 by 5, I would say. So let's do this. And then,
for those that are wondering, you just did the live template to expand the main thing.
Oh, did I?
Yes.
Okay.
You've taught your fingers so well, you don't even remember what you did.
It seems to work on the Mac then, similarly to, yeah. I'm just waiting until I close it while trying to type.
Right.
Oh, I hope I don't have to put a decorator there, because I will close PyCharm then. So main calc, so we have some kind of production code here. So how do I test that? Well, with Tox. And I don't need pytest yet, because that's far too advanced, I would say. So let's just test that. What happens if I run this? What's the shortcut for that? You see, now I'm lost. So let's use let's use this one, run prod. 15, that seems to be right. So we've written a working program on.
And look at that path that it chose, yeah.
Yeah, it's okay, isn't it? So it's as Python now. Let's try if that switching works. It might not work because there's this bug if you have several open. So if I run this again now. Oh, yeah, okay, so that works. So I switched the environment, I ran it again. Now it's using Python 2, and now it should use Python 3.
For those of you that have to support Python 2 and Python 3 at the same code base, this is fantastic.
Yeah, and it actually works. So I'm pleased also. Yeah, and if I want to, yeah, let's plug that into Tox in the most stupid, simple way, really. Let's stay boring. So I don't want to use a test framework to test my code yet. It's doing some weird things now. So there. How can I test that? Well, I just run it, I would say. So, and as I want to do the same thing on 2 and 3 now, I'm lazy. I use this one, so I say commands Python, and that is always using the Python that is my virtual environment. There were also questions, somebody found this confusing, but this is then the Python, because in that point, when I'm in commands here, how I can think about this then, here I am in the activated virtual environment. And if I type Python there or any other command line tool, the command line tool in that virtual environment will be used. So that is going to be the virtual environment Python. So I say here Python protpy, and this will be used in both then. And here I don't even have to set an extra base Python because that's going to be the right one. And here it's Python 2. So, and we can actually run tox. And this is going to be fixed. I made sure of
right. Yeah.
So this is going to be written, not capitalized anymore. Very soon, I was told. From tox import config as tox config, session as tox session, module. Yeah, that is the problem I had on Linux also. It worked on my Linux again today, and there seems to be some kind of bug. But I'm definitely going to have a look at this if I have some time to maybe if I can help with improving the support there on that.
All right.
But my use case usually for tox, I use it on the command line. That's why I don't even see those problems yet. So if I run this now, and you see now this was just dev3, because I set my env list first to dev3, and if I comment that out now again, and run it again, then it should run all the environments again. So dev3 and dev2 are both fine, and the 15 is even outputted. Let's make some breaking change to see what it looks like when it's bad. Am I going too slow?
No, it's very good. No. It makes sense, the path you're on.
Okay, if the detail height is too great, then let me know. So let's break this. How can we break this? Let's break that in the most simple way. I really like raising syntax error exceptions. I don't know why. Makes me feel warm and cozy. Don't type this. Doesn't really matter what we do here. Let's just do some kind of error. And if I run this again, I hope it fails.
Yeah.
So
it failed twice because you were running.
Yeah. So I have both in both. Yeah, I could actually. You could have done something that fails in 2 and 3 by using the print statement.
Yeah.
I'm not creative enough for this. I prefer syntax errors. So this is what it looks like if it fails, and then here you have an error, invocation error, and this is definitely something that we should change, I think, because that looks a bit like there was an error in tox itself, invocation error. That sounds really scary. But that really just means a command that was invoked in the tox context failed. So, and it failed with exit code 1. And it gives me the information. And if I don't use a test framework or whatever, then it gives me the traceback, which actually might be good enough for the first few years of your project. But if then at some point you want to do a little bit better testing, how about using pytest?
Sounds good.
Okay. Then let's write a file test prod. And let's create a function called test calc. Let's test the hell out of this function. So I am if nobody knows pytest, so if you really never heard about pytest yet, it's a very simple testing framework on first view, because you just write a function called test, and then you use the native assert, and you execute your production code in whatever way you want to test it. Import calc, assert calc 1, 1 equals 10, whatever. So we're having a test now, and now to make that work in tox, I add a dependency, and if I want to add that directly, there are also thousands of different ways to do that. But if I just want to add it in the most simplest way, I just add a deps key in my test env and say I need pytest, and then this will be installed. And this should work out of the box because we at least detect if tox.ini changed itself. So now it should do a recreate. So dev3 recreate. It recreates the virtual environment and installs pytest on top. And then we have our test dependency. We still have the syntax error because we still don't really test it. We just added the dependency now. But let's then test it properly, which we can do by just calling pytest here. Because pytest finds all files and modules that are starting with test underscore. This is why we call this test underscore. And in there it finds everything that starts with test underscore that is a function, or if you want to have it in classes for structuring, because that's the only reason why you need to do it. You don't need to have a class. You could write class test, whatever, and then have test functions in there that start with test underscore. You could also do that, or we keep it simple here. So, and if we run this again, then, ooh, that looks much nicer now. So we have our first failing pytest. Assert1 equals 10, and we have an assertion error because the assertion failed. I would expect though a syntax error though, wouldn't you? Still, somehow. But no, I'm doing unit testing. So, and this is why I actually like functional testing, because we have a horrible bug in our software, but if we only do unit testing, we will never find out, because we will never hit that code path. So if we write a successful code test now, that should, oh, I can't, I was bad at math. Oh yeah, so now it's green because our calc function does the right thing, but our program is still broken. So I would like to write a system test now, but that would take too long. But I would actually, and I would really have tests also that then create a sub-process and actually really run my command line tool and go through the whole chain, even if I write a simple command line tool like this. Because I mean, what's the worth in writing a command line tool that works perfectly, but you have one simple bug somewhere in the setup code, and the program still crashes on the user. So this is really important to test it. Yeah, but let's fix it for now. So we have a simple script now. We have tested without pytest and with pytest. We wrote a simple test. And now the next step I would actually do is creating a package, because I do that very early in the process. Also because that saves you a lot of pain, or basically if you see code that contains sys.path insert quite at the beginning somewhere, then you know somebody is willing to go through a different kind of pain. I don't like this pain, so this is why I make things installable right away. And this is actually really not that hard. So I create a little package. Let's call that also prod, and a Python package means nothing else. Create a folder that contains a dunder init py. PyCharm does that for me. And there's nothing extra magical involved there either, because I saw somebody asking, yeah, but I have to do PyCharm create package. There's, no, you don't. You just have to create a folder and put a dunder init py there. That is creating a package. And this is the kind of magical thinking. I mean, if you don't really know, maybe something else happens in the background. No, nothing. Everything happens on the file level. Everything that matters is in this folder at the moment. Everything that matters for my execution and test is in this folder, and everything in my project is there, and everything is visible. So if I want to create a package, I move my project in there. And my test code, I always put in a folder called tests. And that is not a package. That also has a story behind it, but I won't go into that. Just trust me for now. So this is then my simple project layout that I have. And now I have the problem that, this is now a little bit red. And actually, PyCharm prevented me from learning how stuff works in Python for quite a long time, because it's so great at taking the pain away for you. by, for example, what I could do now, I could say mark directory as sources root and whatever, everything's fine. But then as soon as I move it somewhere else,
or do CI,
outside, and do CI, then nothing works anymore. So this is the point then when I create a setup py.
We do have a little task you can run to create a setup.
Really? Oh, wow. That's good to know.
And so you've memorized all this crap by now.
Yeah. It's really, you don't have to memorize much actually. So that's the point. I mean, to create a package, you don't really need much. You need something that has a name. And let's call that prod. And you need to tell it where the packages are. And you need to be able to type on the Mac. Packages, and there it expects a list, but I'm that lazy, I don't even want to do that. So I say find packages instead. And project structure and all this is also, there's also a lot to that, but this is the simple way, like we said. So if I do this, then I don't even have to list it by hand, and if I add another package there, it will be automatically detected if I rerun my installation. Nothing magical there either. So now I should have a package, I think. And now I should install that package. Shall we do that manually? No, I better do that through tox because it's taking longer than I thought anyway already. So,
but if you do it in tox, then you won't get completion in the IDE, right?
Sorry, if I do it in tox, then
you won't get completion in the IDE when you're trying to expand package imports and things like that.
Well, I install it here as and that's the
go ahead.
Yeah, let me just expand on that. So we moved the test. We I think created an installable project that should work already. And yeah, that's the thing I wanted to mention. The Python's best kept dev secret. And it's not a joke. I mean, this is something.
Totally agree.
Most people I tell this about, I say them install it in development mode. They don't know what I mean. And this is something I'm on a mission to make this general knowledge, and that is boring because there's nothing.
Every time I have a project that I think, oh, I'm not going to need it this time. Every time I find out.
Know about this. I mean, you're like 10 steps further ahead. Most people don't even know what that means if you install it as editable. And PyCharm still doesn't provide the functionality, but there's a bug that hopefully will be fixed, that actually PyCharm, in my opinion, it should be able to detect if I have an installable package, and it should offer me to install it in development mode when I open it.
Because we do some of those other things that would make sense to do.
Yeah, but this should be the thing that you should be doing rather than the other things, actually, I think. But for now, you still have to do that on the command line, and let's do that on the command line quickly, at least. Am I in the right folder? So if I wanted to install my package now in wherever, let's do that in that Python thing that we have lying around. Tox Python activate. So no, bin activate, right? And on Windows it's scripts, obviously, so that's not so easy. So now I can say pip install -- editable, or if I'm lazy, which I am, just -e, and then pass to the project, which is dot because I'm in the project, and then it should obtain it and install it. Yeah, and so if I say pip list, then I have all of a sudden my project in my officially installed list, and it points to where it is, and this means this is installed in development mode. So if I change code here, this code will automatically propagate. Propagate means it's actually there, it's just symlinked into my virtual environment. So I didn't copy the code into my interpreter. Usually if I would install it normally, it would end up here in my lib Python 3.6, side packages, prod. There would be a folder there where my code is copied in, but it's not there, and instead there's this prod app link, which is basically telling the virtual env the code is somewhere else, use this one instead. And that is the whole idea behind this development mode. And now I can't do it with PyCharm, but PyCharm now, as it's installed, if I activate this environment, then everything works and I don't have to do any extra magic, and I can just install my production code and my test code and now it's actually from prod.prod because we have a package.
Right.
prod import calc. So, and that should work again now. And if I want to do the same thing in tox, then what I have to add is one other little switch, which is called use develop equals true, which means do pip install -e, just like I did. And this is called use develop. And it's called use develop because this pip install -e is actually the next generation of doing this. The old generation was Python setup py develop.
This is what I do.
Yeah. But pip install -e dot is exactly the same also, just a different way of saying it. And if I run my tox now, it might actually do the right things. Because we have used develop now, we install pytest and we run pytest. We have an installed package now, so it should be green, and it is. So, and now we have, it looks completely pointless, I know this, but this is basically then the seed for something that is a project that you will have to live with for the next, I don't know, 2 to 10 years.
Yeah.
And why not just set it up properly right away? And then you're done with it. And then, sure, all this will grow. This setup py at some point will have horrible functions that do automatic version generation and specific bug fixes for if you use an older version of virtual env, then do this and whatever. Yes, that will grow there, but it's still the best way how we can do things there. So and everything is better than all these handmade solutions that when I join as a project, as somebody who's doing Python for 10 years, and I sit there and I have no idea how things work, and I don't even know where to get started. What's the value of that? I mean, it's better to have to use actually the normal processes that we agreed on as a community, that how should we make things installable, how should we run them, and this is just the standard way. Yeah, so now we have a tox that does this development install, runs our tests, and actually now we're really already, let me have a look at the time. So it's the 1 hour is over, and it looks like I hardly didn't do anything. I hope I explained a few things. And now we are actually already in the realms of, from now on, it would get actually quite repetitive, because the same thing that I do with pytest, exactly the same I do when I want to integrate linting or pre-commit or do my release automation or whatever, because whatever I do, I create an environment, I set it up by installing a few things, and then I run a few commands, and it's boring.
Look at one of the questions.
We still have time.
You're enjoying it.
Okay, well, if you're not bored, I'm not bored, we can go until 8. But I mean, basically, the main thing is really that already. And what next thing I wanted to do is, add some linting, flag and flag 8, at least mention these things that they exist. Okay, yeah, let's have some production code that somebody wrote that is not me, because I would never do things like this, that contains a line that is much too long. I think it's slowly too long. And PyCharm complains, oh, I did something, I broke, so I put the comma at the same one place. Yeah, that's the first thing I do, by the way, when I have PyCharm open. I open my inspections, and go to my Python section, and I switch everything on, and I set everything to error and make it like it jumps in my face. And so if I open a file, everything's red then, so that I can fix it properly. And that's like the first line of defense, and that is already linting. That is really, that solves 90% of the problems already right in the editor. And for the rest, then you have tools like Black, which does the automatic formatting for you. And actually, it won't work with this long string, I think, because Black is still struggling with reformatting long strings. So that might actually not be a good idea. I'm not sure, though. This will work, though. And then Flake 8 will also find a lot of linting problems and also potential bugs. There's Flake 8 bugbear, it's called. It's a plugin for Flake 8, which then points out potential bugs, for example. Is this now the warning that the line is long? Yeah. So PyCharm is already warning me, and this would be an error in my setup. That wouldn't be just this little squiggly line. That would be deep red. Yeah, but now, for now, that's good enough. And if I then want to add black to my mix, I create a new environment. Why does it do that sometimes? So let's add a black environment. Let's call that auto format black. Do we need to install anything? Yeah, we need to install black. Commands black, and I think you have to give it the folder that it should format. So we
Commands equal.
Well, let's commands equal. Yeah, let's just lint the prod folder. But usually we lint everything. But if I say black dot, I'm not sure if it actually tries to go down there. But I think it automatically excludes tox. So let's try this one. So do we have linting? Tox -e black. Boo! Runtime error. Click will abort further execution because Python 3 was configured to use ASCII as encoding environment. Oh, that must be
a Mac OS
problem.
Yeah. Oh, I think there's an environment variable lang that you set.
Python 3 was configured. Wow. Okay, then let's just run that with Python 2. Yeah, Armin Rohenmacher wrote a lot of really helpful articles about the problems with Python 3. It actually helped to make the transition for many of us easier because he pointed out exactly what's the problem and how it could be made better by reintroducing Unicode literals, for example, and things like that. And
it's actually good.
It's maintained.
It's actually a good description of why you want multiple environments when you're running things.
And here, I actually like this error because it tells you what went wrong. It even gives you a link to where you can actually look what's going wrong. So this is a wonderful error. So I like to see things like this. Base Python 2.7. Let's see if Mac is happy with that. Collecting black could not find a version that satisfied. Oh,
all right.
Where's that?
Well, we'll skip it. Continue.
Okay.
But explain the idea. The idea is some more of your tooling you can move into Tox's configuration file, right?
Sorry, something just popped up, and
okay.
Yeah.
But the point that you were going to make with this was you can take other parts of your tooling and make them part of the Tox.
Yeah, I mean, basically that's what I said. Well, now it's starting to get repetitive because I'm just doing the same thing now. I create new environments and I do something. Like I'm not happy with black. Okay, let's try Flake 8 then because I wanted to do that anyway. And black is pip installable though, so I don't really know what's going on there.
Someone commented that you installed black only in Python 3. The depths was not.
No, this environment is always.
It's actually. Okay.
So I say here, create an environment based on Python 2 or Python 3 or whatever, and then install these things into this environment, which will be called black.
Black requires Python 3.6 or higher.
Ah, okay. Yeah, and it doesn't work on Python 3, so good.
Yeah, right.
Okay, and then there's a version specifier in the black project that actually tells you it's not available. But that then is a kind of error that is confusing, where why doesn't it exist? Would be nice if there would be some kind of message then. Black doesn't exist for Python 2, but yeah, I mean I can perfectly understand why it doesn't support Python 2. We're going to drop Python 2 support soonish also. Yeah, but let's do this Flake 8 and see if that works. But then at least you saw the idea behind it. And that from now on, it's already getting repetitive and venturing in the world of, okay, and now start to do the really interesting, tricky things. And this is the point then also where I would hint to go to our wonderful documentation and read it 3 times in a row And then you might have an idea what you can do with tox. Or this is also a very good link, the sources of tox, for example, to find out how things work.
If you have a question, it's probably already been asked and answered in issues, right?
Possibly, or Stack Overflow also has a tox, a tox tag.
Good.
So if you add the tox tag and add a question there, I'm lurching there if I have the time and it's an interesting question. I might try to answer it, but usually they are answered quite quickly. So did we have more luck with Flake 8? Yeah, so Flake 8 ran now and it complains that the line is too long. But I don't want a tool that complains that my line is too long. I want a tool that reformats my file when the line is too long, and that is what Black would do. So, but yeah, now I have Flake 8. Now I have a bit of linting and testing already. And the next thing that at least I want to mention, because the main thing in this part is really say that those things exist and maybe show a little example. This is a tool from, I hope I pronounce his name correctly, Anthony Sottile. He is very active in pytest now, and he's also doing in tox a lot. And he's the creator of this. And that is a language agnostic framework that is trying to solve this problem of I have a lot of quality assurance tools and they're getting more and more, and I need all of them, and I want some way to tame this beast. And
for everyone in the project.
Yeah, sure. And I want to make sure that you even have, that's why it's called pre-commit, that you can even have a hook that you can't even commit.
Right. It's not voluntary, it's mandatory.
Well, let's say it has several stages, because the way how we do it in our team, at least, we're not forcing anyone to, you have to use this tool or you have to do it like that. We're a bit hippie that way. But I still want to make sure that our code is in good shape. So if somebody doesn't install the pre-commit hook on their machine and they push something, well, guess what the first stage in our CI is? It's tox-e pre-commit, exactly the same thing that people have installed as their pre-commit hook, and it just runs on tox. Because I mean, the thing that I didn't mention explicitly yet is I do all this here locally on my machine, but on a CI system, exactly the same thing happens. What we do is we have some kind of CI set up, and if you want to see examples, look at tox or pytest or maybe some of my smaller projects. There's a Travis YAML in there, or a Circle CI, or a Gitlab, whatever. There's some kind of YAML file that contains not much text usually, where it says at some point pip install tox environment name or something, and then you can run all these things exactly like that in the CI. And this
just in case people don't know, CI is continuous integration.
That's right.
And every time it's watching for pushes, for example, to your master branch, and it will go do a series of tasks that it's configured to.
Yeah, that's right. And tox unifies that. So you say tox-e on your developer box, and you say tox-e on some CI machine somewhere at the other end of the planet, and the same thing happens. So you can develop your complete build, test, release workflow with tox. You can run it all locally, and the same, or let's say 98% the same, should happen on CI, because there's always this caveat that world is messy and that you have some security issues, that you can't just use your production keys on your developer machine and all these kinds of messy things. But basically it should be almost the same, except for some configuration details. And pre-commit is bundling this. And I think rather than doing things in here now, I'd rather show a few examples. They might then look a bit scary, but in tox we have pre-commit, because this is how I learned about it, because this Anthony appeared and opened a pull request and added pre-commit for us, which is great. So there's a YAML file, and there, for example, and it needs to be supported on some kind of hook level. So there is a lot of hooks. If we look at the web page of pre-commit, how can I open another? No, it doesn't work like this. Yeah, that's the web page for it. So pre-commit.com. And there's an overview somewhere, supported hooks, and that's a long list already.
Oh, wow.
That's all the kind of things that you can stick
I
in
didn't
there.
know. Oh, gosh.
And it's really completely language agnostic. So if you have some kind of really good linting tool that runs on Node, then it will actually Webpack or Yard or whatever install this for you also. And that's another thing. Pre-commit creates its own virtual environment also to work in. This is one reason why I would like to have a possibility to not build a virtual environment in Tox, so that you can say basically, just run Tox commands here. I don't need a virtual environment for this, because then you could say run pre-commit here, and then we wouldn't build a virtual environment in a virtual environment in a virtual environment.
It's a little bit
environment. Yeah, so you have less turtles, right? But it works. It works. It's just a little bit more tedious. So there's a lot there. There's all kinds of fixes. There's flag 8, black. Everything is supported via that. And what that looks like is, if you look in the Tox project, we have black. And this switch is really important. This means that it creates an abstract syntax tree before it reformats your code. And then afterwards, it creates an abstract syntax tree. And then it compares the two abstract syntax trees and knows, okay, I didn't break your code. So you don't even have to worry that this reformatting could cause any kind of problem.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's Lukas Langa who writes.
Oh, that's true. He knows a thing or two.
Yeah, he knows his stuff, I think. So there's all kinds of hooks that we use, fixed trailing white space and all these kind of things. And yeah, and in the end, it's a YAML file. And on the Tox side, it looks then, we have a Tox environment that runs this, which is called fixlint. Yeah, fixlint. So here, and there's a little bit of real world complication in here. We need to pass some paths and all that. Life is complicated. And so here, pre-commit run, and then this happens locally, or you can install it and it's as commit hook, which then means that you don't even need a Tox environment for that. Yeah, but this is really getting repetitive, I think, and I mentioned everything I wanted to mention. You can run your coverage.py by NetBatchLder is just the go-to tool, and it has a nice API and it's well supported. You can build your docs in there, you can do your releases, and if you want inspiration, if this was all too boring and too simple, then look at real projects like Tox, like pytest, or look on GitHub for tox.ini and look at what people do with Tox, and it's basically really everything. So that was the end of the marketing talk. And yeah, and I would love to show what it looks like on CI. Maybe one more hint to one of my projects on GitLab, where you can have a look what that looks like. The Commodorificator, that's a tool that I basically just wrote because it's fun, and it uses GitLab integrated CI. So this is what a GitLab CI YAML looks like. It's 5 lines of code to get your Tox test running in CI.
All right, I've got 3 things that are queued up. If we'll get this wrapped up in a couple of minutes and go through these questions first. First one's mine. Yeah, moderator privilege, right? You did your Tox driving from the command line because you're the Tox guy. You're comfortable doing that. But we can also mention PyCharm has this nice visual test runner kind of thing where you can sit in your tests and run this test, that test, the other test. I know you don't use it, but perhaps you could comment a little bit about it.
Well, I use it for PyTest. I mean, my development workflow is I have this is why I like this tool, the pypi manage. My development workflow is I have everything in Tox. I run this, and then I have these environments, and then I activate the one that interests me in the moment. Then I work on my tests, and I run my tests directly from there. So usually I have, if I would know what the keyboard shortcut would be, I would do this. So, but I'm basically in the code that I'm interested in, either this test or in the module. It's all context sensitive. This is what I like. If I'm here, it runs all the tests in the folder. If I'm here, it runs all the tests in the file. I right click on it or do the keyboard shortcut and it runs them. And I can even debug them also. And that's one of the reasons why I basically live in PyCharm. It's all super comfortable. And here we hit the bug that we just mentioned, that if you have configured unit tests, then it doesn't complain yet properly, and that will change also very soon, I guess. So if I delete that again, and if I create then a proper configuration, yeah, I actually wanted to show that quickly anyway. If I have time, if I get the chance, I will do. So if I search, yeah, I just have to search for pytest here. So it's Python integrated tools, and I want default test runner to be pytest. And if I switch that on then, and if I delete my run configuration, because that doesn't realize that something changed. So I delete my run configuration, and then if I run it again, then it will actually do something a bit nicer. No, it doesn't. I think I managed not to save it when I tried to save it. Oh, I did. Okay. I did. And I should have pytest installed there. So if I activate that, and just for good luck, delete the runtime configuration again. So it's gone. Now it should work. No, it doesn't.
Still didn't pick it up.
I found a new bug. Cool.
All right.
I mean, I never had that problem before on my system, that I couldn't make it actually run with pytest.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what's going on here. But usually what you meant is you have this test overview here then.
Right.
And it shows you all the tests that it run, and it has these nice little check marks similar to here. So yeah, that's how I usually use it. That's my workflow. I run my tests in pytest, and tox for me is then the conduit over into the where I start committing stuff, you know, when I bother the world with my code, then tox comes into play. But
it may be that it thinks the project interpreter doesn't have pytest installed in it.
Yeah, let's have a quick. I think that might be actually a bug with this
Is that plugin?
Yeah, with the plugin.
Yeah.
So that it's not does have.
So over here, it does think it has.
No, but it has all. It looks all pretty.
All right, we'll keep moving.
Okay.
We have a question from our friend Martin about this could be an hour, but it's the whole point about SRC source versus name of your product as the directory that your sources are in.
Yeah.
Heineck has this long blog post.
Yeah, we use that. I mean, if you look at the tox source code,
right?
I mean, that's the thing. I had this caveat. I want to try keep things simple, but I would recommend in a real world scenario, if you want to be 100% sure that you don't shoot yourself in the foot, use the source layout, which means have a folder here, src, that contains all the package that is not a package itself. And that protects you from that you accidentally test things that you didn't want to test because they happen to be in the past.
Exactly.
Because if you run pytest -m my test, then it puts my package in, or my actual path in the first part of this path, and then it might find the uninstalled things that I don't want to test. I want to test my package. So to prevent all this, yeah, that's definitely the way to go.
We got an explanation about why the pytest integration wasn't working. You were in the wrong project for the preferences.
I was in the wrong yeah, but we looked at it just now. They're all correct. This one?
No, for the integrated tools.
Oh, they are project. Oh, that's also for. Okay. I thought that is globally. Oh, okay. Yeah. Actually, I never noticed that that's also for all of them. Yeah. Yeah, so it should work then now, finally. If I delete this again. Yeah. Okay. Good to know.
Thank you.
Yoo-hoo! Well, that's said that. Thank you.
Now I know who to get in for the next webinar, right?
So here I have now check marks.
Okay, last question. It probably will be a very fast and easy one because we covered the one for Martin. Last question. Is there any talk of a book for tox?
One would have to write one. I heard Brian talking about it. Okay. I mean, he wanted to put a little section in his really great book, pytest, testing Python with pytest. He has a tiny section about it, but actually the book is what really, the documentation is the book at the moment. Just try it. It's not that hard. And if you hit a wall, write me a mail. No, don't write me a mail. Write on Stack Overflow or write on the issues or write on Twitter, and then we see. I'm sure we'll get it going.
And we should take this as a moment to thank Brian for partially getting you and I introduced.
Oh, yeah.
Brian Ocken, Test and Code podcast, has you on an episode from perhaps 2 months ago, covering a lot of this and a lot of your background as well.
Yeah, that was actually more waffling about stuff that didn't really have to do with tox. This is why I wanted to make sure that here I actually concentrate on the absolute basics on tox and show these and not waste too much time with talking about other things.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll go ahead and start the wrap-up process and switch back over to my screen. And thank you to all of you that stayed a little bit longer. The entirety of this was useful. And thanks to you, Oliver, for taking the time to talk with us about tox and release automation. Hope it was worth it.
Thank you. Yeah, it was. I think it was okay.
If any of you in the audience have any questions later, please don't hesitate to reach out to us by email or social media. If you'd like to get more information on PyCharm, please go to our website at jetbrains.com/PyCharm. We'd love to have your feedback on this webinar, so please feel free to contact us on Twitter or in the after webinar survey. Please fill in the survey. We look at this stuff and we use it to plan other webinars and to improve the webinars that we do. The recording will be made available on our YouTube channel soon. If you haven't already, please check out our PyCharm blog. On the blog, you can find up-to-date PyCharm news about releases and events, in addition to educational resources. So, for example, the recording of this webinar will be published there in, I usually say a few days. In this case, it might be less than that, so very quickly. We'll also provide some additional links and information from the presentation on the blog. That's all from us today. Thank you very much for joining us and hope you have a nice day.
Bye-bye.